Yo, what is poppin' YouTube? Tempo TCG here, back on the Shuffle Squad YouTube channel, and today I'm back here with another tier list video. The meta has actually developed, mind you. There has been no major events or anything, but the meta is still changing. There's still limitless events happening, and there's been some more discussion throughout the group of, hey, maybe this deck is better than we thought. Maybe this deck isn't as good as we thought. So you know what? There's no better time to talk about a meta than all the time. The meta is always evolving. So here, let's jump right into it with the first deck of today, which is Lost Box. So Lost Box is a deck that still just feels really solid. It still feels like it's a top 10 deck, which is pretty solid, but it doesn't feel the best that it ever has, but it doesn't feel the worst that it ever has. Takes a pretty solid matchup spread. So it's going to be a B tier deck for right now. I think if you're going to a major or a cup or a challenge, I think Lost Box is always going to be a safe play pretty much. So for that reason, it's going in the B tier for right now. Moving on, we do have Lugia, which Lugia I think is definitely a good deck. I think Lugia is probably going to show up really hot at Indianapolis next weekend. So I think that it's probably a really safe play if you're looking at picking up Lugia. Maybe you're like, hey, I am still super torn on a deck. I need something that beats Charizard, which Lugia does do that. And I want to play the best of my abilities, but maybe I don't have the most time. Lugia is one of those decks that is pretty easy to pick up, that you can play pretty effectively as long as you've put a little bit of time into your matchups. Shout out Zach Lesage, go join his Metafy class if it's happened yet. I'm not sure if it's happened by the time this video goes up, but if it has and you were there, play Lugia. If it hasn't, sign up and play Lugia. The deck just feels really strong right now. I think it's really well positioned, probably better than Lost Zone Box. As long as you dodge Turbo Hands, which should realistically be on a decline because of the rise in Charizard, I think you're probably fine. So Lugia's going over here in the B tier. Now Ancient Box is one of those decks that I posted and I was like, I think it's high B tier, and people did not like that take. I had a lot of people being like, Ancient Box deserves A tier at least, and they might be right. I've been doing a lot more testing. I've been seeing a lot of success with Ancient Box. Just locally, everywhere, I'm seeing Ancient Box pop up. It's doing really solid. So for that reason, I have decided that this week we are going to be bumping Ancient Box up to the A tier. I think it's a top 5 deck in the format right now. I think it's really good. And honestly, I think it and Moonsparce, which is this deck right here, I think they both kind of go hand in hand in that they're both take really great matchup spreads. So for that reason, they're both going over here in the A tier. Banette Item Lock is still probably not a great deck to play. It's going to go in the D tier for now. I've decided to change up the way the tiers work, where like, if you're not going to be doing really great at the regional, you're probably a D tier deck, right? Whereas C tier is like, yeah, it might do okay. But D tier is like, if you're not doing crazily good at the regional, you're not going to be in this. Here we have got Snorlax. I think Snorlax could be pretty good. I think it's still the sleeper deck of the format. I think as long as you're not playing against a super experienced Charizard player, you've still got a pretty okay matchup. So it kind of depends on that. It kind of depends like what you're going to hit. If you're going to hit high skilled Charizard players, they're probably going to beat you really easily. But if you're playing a lot of low skilled Charizard players that are just going Charizard attack, rawr, you're probably fine. So for that reason, I've got Blocklax over here in the C tier. Bibzard is another deck that don't play this. It's not D tier because it's bad like the other D tier decks. It's going in the D tier because it is way worse than Pidgeot Charizard. So like, there's no reason to sit here and play Bibzard, right? Entei Valiant, still D tier, don't play this deck. Regular Roaring Moon, D tier, don't play this deck. If you're going to be playing Roaring Moon EX, play Moonsparce. It's just better in every way. Arc Armarouge, this deck feels pretty good. I think its matchup spread is okay. I think your Charizard match is pretty solid. I actually haven't tested too much with Arc Armarouge, but I think the deck is solid. We do have a local to the area that does love the deck a very large amount, and he produces some great results, including 17th at NAIC. Shout out Julian. Or not NAIC, EUIC. Shout out Julian. So yeah, I think it's probably a C tier play. I think that it's a little bit of a higher skill than a deck like Arctina, but I just don't think the meta is very forgiving for it, and sometimes you're a little bit bricky. Raging Bolt Gardevoir, don't play this. Turbo Hands is another C tier deck. I just don't think the deck is really great right now. I think it could also, maybe it deserves B tier. I think it's still maybe 10th, maybe 11th place in the meta. So for that reason, I'm going to probably throw it in B tier. If it was my opinion, I would be putting it in the C tier, but I honestly do think the deck does still have its footing. I think it could still be pretty good. So I do have to put it up in the B tier. The deck just bricks a lot. It feels pretty bad, to be honest. Your late game plays are none. So the deck is just, I don't know. I think it's probably going to dwindle down. People are going to stop playing it because they're going to start realizing, hey, maybe this deck isn't that great, but maybe people are going to keep playing it. I don't really know. Torterra, definitely D tier. Lost Teen is another deck that seems really strong right now. Definitely better than both the Ancient Box decks. However, it does lose to the Ancient Box decks. I do still think it is probably a top 5 deck in the format. The S and A is just the top 5 decks in the format. So I do think having Tina up here is really strong. I think it's either the second or third best deck in the format, potentially third. I'm very torn between it and chien-pao, which probably, these two are probably very interchangeable on what deck is actually the second best deck in the format. I guess we'll kind of wait and see what happens in Indianapolis, how the meta shapes up, how it forms around these decks. I think chien-pao is really great, though. I think it does a lot. It takes a pretty good matchup spread. Your Ancient Box matchup is pretty brutal. That's kind of what's good about Ancient Box, is like, when you're looking at it, you're like, yeah, you might lose to Charizard, but if you're like a Moonsparce player, you're not really losing to Charizard. But you do absolutely dismantle Giratina and chien-pao as just regular Ancient Box, so that's what kind of makes it okay to lose to Charizard. But even still, I don't think the Charizard matchup is all that poor. I think it's definitely winnable as long as you play proper, as long as you don't dead draw. I think it's okay. Lost Zard, don't play this. There's way better ways to play Charizard, such as Pidgeot Zard, which is still the #1 deck in the format by a mile. It's probably going to win Indianapolis because Charizard is just that deck, right? I've said it in all these videos. If you're not playing Charizard, or a deck that beats Charizard, or a deck that beats the decks that beat Charizard, you're probably not playing the right deck. Like, that's kind of the issue with Turbo Iron Hands, is like, it doesn't take great matchups, and you would lose to Charizard. And none of these other top decks, like, you can really look at and go, it loses to Charizard, right? Like, even like Ancient Box, I think it's pretty unfavorable into Charizard, but I don't think it's unwinnable, right? Like, it's probably a 60-40, which sucks, but you know what? It isn't the worst ever, whereas like Turbo Hands is probably like a 70-30, maybe 75-25. Like, it just feels really bad into Charizard. The Spathra, this is a deck that I'm still going to put in the C tier. I do actually think it's solid. I think it's got its footing. I do actually see it making potentially some top 32s and stuff, and I think that genuinely it can be a really good deck. Gardevoir is a deck I am going to be bumping out of the A tier to high B tier. It is now the #1 player in B tier. I just think that these other 4 decks are all maybe a little bit better. I think Gardevoir and Moonsparce are pretty close. I think Ancient Box is definitively a better deck. It does take a pretty good Charizard Gardevoir matchup as well. Gardevoir, once again, takes a good Charizard matchup. So, yeah, I think Gardevoir is really safe here. It's probably around the 6th best deck in the format. So, for that reason, it is going at the top of B tier. It's just, I don't see it in the top 5 right now. I think these 5 decks are all a little bit better and a little bit more well-positioned in the current meta. They're a little bit easier to play too, because that's something we have to take into account, is not everybody is Josh Frank who can pilot Gardevoir very, very well. It is a difficult deck to play, and at the end of the day, if you're not smart about the way you play it, you're just not going to do well. Dialga Matang is another C-tier deck. I think the deck is probably better than Block, probably better than Arcjar, probably better than a Spathra. I think the deck definitely has its footing. It feels really fun. I really like the way that the lists have moved forward away from TM Evolution. The deck just feels absolutely incredible right now. I did just put up a Dialga video on this channel maybe a week ago at this point, maybe might be 2 weeks ago. I actually don't know exactly when this video is going up, so Dialga could be a little bit old by then, but check out that video. I think Dialga's super strong, right? Like, it can take extra turns. That's literally just it. Like, if you're playing against like Turbo Hands and you go Boss Iron Crown, I'll take an extra turn, and then Boss Iron Hands, and then, oh, I blow it up, and they've got nothing, right? Like, what are they gonna do? You're now up 4 prizes potentially in 1 turn, and there's literally, like, they can't make any plays around that, and that's what's really scary. Arctina. Now, this deck is another deck that has fallen down. I do think that Arctina is probably down to, like, the 8th spot, maybe the 9th spot. But I think it's probably still better than Lost Box, probably still better than Turbo Hands. I think like the top 10 is definitively these decks, right? Like Charizard at 1, chien-pao at 2, Tina at 3. The 2 like ancient decks at 4 and 5 seems pretty okay. Gardevoir 6, Lugia 7, Arctina 8, Lost Box 9th, and Iron Hands at 10, right? Like, you can switch out Gardevoir and Moonsparce, and it's still a pretty good tier list in my opinion, but I think this is definitively like the 10 best decks in the format. Meowscarada is probably D tier. Don't play that deck. It sees success in tournaments that are a little bit smaller because there's a lot more focus. You're likely to hit a lot more Charizard, right? Like, I know it's like, oh, Charizard's 30% of the meta at every event, but like, if you really think about it, it definitely depends, like, based on what you're playing, like, and where you're playing, right? Like, if there's 30% Charizard and it's beating a lot of lower skilled players, and Charizard's going to have a lot higher winning percentage, and you win your first game against a Charizard, you're more likely to hit a Charizard, right? Whereas if you're at a higher skill event, I think that Charizard is maybe not going to be as big because some people are going to know how to play around it. So just probably don't play Meowscarada. If you're going to play a Charizard counter, Espathra feels fine. Chien-pao feels fine. Tina feels fine. Play one of those instead of Meowscarada. Ride on Alecki, don't play that deck either. Lost Goo, probably don't play that deck either. Both for the same reason, is that they're just not competitively great right now. They've seen way better days. I know Goodra, you can make an argument for that, hey, it's got its place in the meta as a rogue deck, but I really just don't see Lost Goo doing anything in the format right now. It just feels overall bad. Like, realistically, if you've got Hero's Cape on and someone goes, yeah, I'll vacuum your Hero's Cape and then I'll Prime Catcher Boss, your Goodra's dead, that's just unfortunate, and that's sometimes just stuff that Goodra has to work out with. Decks like Lugia one-shot you, decks like Gardevoir can still one-shot you, decks like chien-pao can still one-shot you, and overall it's just not great, right? So for that reason, it's kind of mediocre. Decks like even Giratina or Roaring Moon, like that unsparse, like realistically, Giratina plays Sinnoh to get rid of your mist energy, they can still just kill you, so it's not really great. Raging Bolt, my beloved, I gotta put you down here in D tier. Probably don't play Raging Bolt, guys. Probably not a great deck for this event. Same thing as Great Tusk. Just both, like, they aren't well positioned. They aren't great. I don't think the decks are gonna do anything in the event. Iron Crown, probably also don't play that deck. Raging Bolt, probably, like, Lost Zone Bolt, don't play that deck either. Like, the thing about all these decks is, like, they're really cool. I think in most other metas, they'd be fine, but, like, with a deck like Future Box, I think it's kind of like the deck just fundamentally isn't there. I think it's a really cool idea. I think on paper it looks like it works, but you've got just too much going on. Your Charizard matchup, you're like, I play Iron Leaves. Yeah, well, when that one Iron Leaves dies and you can't recycle it fast enough, you just lose, right? And it's unfortunate, but sometimes that's just the game. Gholdengo Palkia, probably Gholdengo feels okay. Gholdengo feels like a solid C tier deck. And for that reason, I'm putting it over here. I don't think it's better than any of these other C tier decks. I think Gholdengo is definitely solid. At the start of the format, I was kind of thinking Gholdengo was going to be really strong. Your 260 HP does hold you back. Palkia's 280 HP does a little bit hold you back, especially because you are an evolving deck, right? Like, most of these other decks that are evolving into either one prizers that do a lot of damage, or two prizers that have a lot of HP, and you're a two prizer that doesn't really have that much HP. Yeah, you can do a lot of damage. Yeah, you can draw a lot of cards, but in the end, Roxanne still hurts you. Like, if they Roxanne you and then kill a Gholdengo, and you've got one Gholdengo and you're drawing two cards, that's not great. Palkia is just not a great card in the format currently, so for that reason, it's going down here in C tier. Raging Bolt Palkia, once again, don't play this deck. Arc Goo, this deck is another deck that I'm like, maybe. Deck feels like it could do something, but it also feels like it could do nothing. Arc Goo is one of those decks that, like, if you set up and you hit good matchups, you're probably fine, but if you hit poor matchups, you're doing really, really bad. The deck, like, feels okay. That's just Arceus decks in general. It's not, like, I've never had an experience where I'm like, wow, this Arceus deck feels amazing right now. Like, Arctina is the one exception, because, like, I think Arctina is actually really good. But, like, Arc Goo, Arc Pix, it's like sometimes you just get dismantled by effects. Like, sometimes you just lose, and that's what sucks. Like, some decks are just gonna bully you and make it have a really hard time. I think Arc Goo's probably going down in the D tier. Pidgeot Control is a B tier deck as well for me. So we do have 11 decks between S and B. And then the kind of the thing about this is, like, I really think that Pidgeot Control could win a major potentially. I think it could make a lot of top 8s, but I just good players aren't playing it. I don't know why. I don't consider myself a pro player because, well, I'm not. I sit here and I create content for you guys, but I just think Pidgeot Control, I think it takes good matchups. It's very hard to pilot, which could be the thing, is it's very taxing to sit here and pilot Pidgeot Control for 15 rounds, and if you make top cut, another 3 rounds. And, like, you got to know everything about every matchup. It's a lot more of a like a time commitment than most other decks are. So for that reason, I think Pidgeot Control, it could be just out of the top 10, but it is definitely 11th if it is. And then Arc Goo picks or Arc picks or yeah, just Goodra picks. Doesn't really matter. Just a deck with Arceus and Vulpix in it. I think Vulpix is strong. I think that being able to not be hurt by Pokemon with abilities is really strong. It's really good. For that reason, I'm putting Goodra over here in the C tier because it's one of those rogue decks like Goodra picks. I think that just adding Vulpix just makes it better. It kind of helps spread out your matchups. It kind of helps you go, well, I can't beat this deck with Goodra, so I'm going to beat this deck with Vulpix. And that's kind of just all there is to it. Yeah, so here's where I've kind of landed at for the current meta. I think it's overall really, really solid. I think the upcoming events like Indianapolis, I think this is probably going to be shaping up like these are going to be the top 8 decks is like S to A. And then B is like these decks could make a top 8. They might not because, you know, it's Lugia, but these decks could make a top 8. They could potentially win the event, but like the decks in C tier, it's like probably won't make a top 8. Probably will do pretty good. And then D tier is like, yeah, you might get a day 2, but you're probably not making a super deep like top 32 or top 16 run. Whereas like everything above like C, like C, B, like C and B are like, yeah, I can see these making a top 16 run. Like B is like top 8. A is like, it doesn't top 8 or win the event. That's weird. And then S is like, if it really doesn't just win the event, that's probably odd. So yeah, here's where I'm at, guys. Let me know what you guys think down below. Let me know what decks I might have ranked too high, what decks I might have ranked too low. And until next time, I'll catch you guys later. Have a great one.
Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.